Welcome back to another episode of the Easy Button Real Estate Podcast with your hosts, Cole Ruud-Johnson and Tucker Merrihew. Today, we have another show of Tucker and myself diving into real-time questions, things that we're getting asked in our community on the live calls that we do from our clients. And as you guys know now, if you are a listener to the show, once a week we release a client episode, a client case study of how different clients at different points of their journey are building their business. And then Tucker and I also release one a week diving into what's going on in our world and questions that we're getting. So, Tucker, how are things going over there in Naples? Kids are back in school, I know now. How are things rolling kind of at the end of the summer there?
They actually go back on Monday.
Okay.
So
I get
last weekend. Last weekend though, as kind of like the end of summer, I went over to Miami, which obviously you were there, about a month ago ish, for the Morgan Wallen concert. But I went over there and took the kiddos, and we went over there to go see the Marlins Yankees game, which was cool. So my son's a big Yankees fan. I don't know how he ended up a Yankees fan, not from New York, but I guess every kid likes the team that wins the most, except for this season. They're not winning much. But so that was cool. I got to see Marlins Stadium. But I spent some time, went to South Beach, went to Miami Beach, did what real estate guys do, checked out a bunch of real estate while I was there, looking at some waterfront teardowns and things like that. Just kind of underwriting the opportunity that's on that side of Florida, and kind of a bigger market over there. So it was a lot of fun. And then we're back here for this week. Kids start school Monday. And, the one thing that's really cool about Florida is it's very community oriented compared to the Northwest. I would say, in terms of like, you don't have to have play dates for your kid to go knock on somebody's door and see if they want to play, right? The kids they just get on their bikes, they go and they see if they can play and whatever. But tomorrow we've got this vacant lot at the end of our street, and the kids have set it up like a baseball diamond. So they call it the sand lot, because really it is sand, right? With a little bit of grass on top. And so a few of the neighborhood moms like organized, like, it's basically going to be the parents are going to be sitting out there drinking and watching them play a game tomorrow afternoon as kind of the last, day of summer for them. And then one of them got an ice cream truck to come. So it's going to be a really cool experience for the kids. And I'm sure parents will have a good time too.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's a true thing, man. Like when I'm in Seattle, it's very rare that kids are just out in the street playing, hanging out. Well, I think the weather's part of that, but obviously it's just kind of the people are just not happy people. And then you have
True.
when I'm in Arizona, visiting Jimmy in his neighborhood or the neighborhoods here, like kids are out on their bikes. They got the little Apple watches on and they can text their parents from. It's a different vibe. Have you ever, are you thinking about, could you ever see yourself one day building in the general kind of Miami area, Fort Lauderdale, or doing deals over there? Have you played with that idea, or is that just a ways off if it does play out?
I don't know, maybe. I always look at it as like, okay, well, do you need to go further to have more opportunity, right? And you don't, because we can build 30, 40, $50 million single family new construction here in Naples and just kind of be that guy here. That's not to say that somebody won't hire us to design and manage construction, over in Miami at some point once our brand gets bigger here. But I don't know, man. I'm not a huge advocate of like absolute business plans, because as we know, they pretty much change year by year. As long as, yeah, we were talking about this last week, as long as you just get up and go to the office every day, good shit will happen, right? And you'll get to where it is that you're supposed to get to. So that's just kind of my outlook on it. But who knows? Maybe.
Yeah, we were having a conversation. For you guys listening, we were having a conversation last week. I think it was off camera. I don't remember if it was on camera. I
It
think it
was
was
it
off
was
camera.
definitely off camera. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were talking about kind of how much shit just goes wrong when you're running a business and in personal life stuff. And most of it can be solved by just showing up to the office the next day and moving the ball forward. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think I was talking about this with Nelson, who's, you guys listening, one of the people on our team, and talking about quarterly planning, because we do a lot of quarterly planning, and then things shift very quickly because we're a startup, and that's what happens when you're below a massive company. That's what happens. And there's a good founder who founded Basecamp at a couple of the software companies that are really big, and they work in 9-week sprints. Like, hey, I don't know what we're gonna do to 3 months from now, but I know for the next 9 weeks. So they have an 8-week sprint, and then the week 9 they reflect and they readjust and they do another 8-week sprint. And it was fascinating because I'm like, yeah, it's about right. Like every 2 months, every 8 weeks, variable shifts pretty big. And I know in construction and stuff, things take, construction timelines are longer and whatnot, but it was a cool framework for me to think of like how quickly things change and variables change. So, we'll move into today's show, go through some common Q&As that I've been coming through recently that we've been getting recently. One of the ones that I talk about a lot on the solo podcast that I've done when I do client case studies and I'm talking to our community is everyone wants to know, like, as they get going, what should their team look like as they start to hire? And I have my own kind of framework for that, but I'm curious, Tucker, where do you stand on someone's starting to rip deals or doing 3, 4 deals a month? They want to start hiring. What are the key roles you think someone needs in a business that's going to be sourcing their own deal flow? Um, and I'd be curious to hear both the sourcing side, but also what their construction team should look like if they're starting to do flips and other things as well. So I'll put that on the table for you to start here, and I'll go through my answer to that all after. But super curious on your kind of thought process on that.
It's never gonna be the same for everybody. There'll be some staples, I think, so I'll preface it with that. I've always said everybody's real estate business is kind of their own thumbprint in a way. It's built just slightly different based on what your strengths are or what your focus is, right? So well, for simplicity's sake, let's just focus on the off-market marketing, deal machine type part of the business as opposed to construction. Because construction is, I look at it as it's almost a completely separate business.
Yeah,
That
start.
sometimes you're vertically integrated, sometimes you're not. But it's a whole nother business that you build on top of the acquisitions business. And so for me, and like I said, this isn't the only way, but this is the way that worked well for me. It started with just me, getting the leads, however you get them, making the callbacks, trying to, build rapport, extract information, set up appointments for the ones that have opportunity, put the ones that maybe need a little more time to cook in the follow-up stack, and then, do the follow-up calls that you've created for yourself in the past at the same time. And as I started acquiring or actually closing on and buying properties, I started to lose the ability and time or the desire and the time to make all the callbacks and do all the things that you need to do if you're going to be paying for, lead generation. And so the first hire, which I think is probably going to be the same for everybody, is some form of, a lead manager that can also hopefully be an acquisition manager for you at this kind of a 2-for-1. That way you're not hiring two different people to do those things. And sometimes people outsource them, maybe they have somebody overseas that's the leads manager, and then they have an acquisitions manager that's, more of an in-office or stateside person, right? But for me, that person was the same person, just because it allowed me to pay them more money, to
Yeah.
secure them to the business longer term, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they try and hire for as cheap as possible, and then really you have a big turnover, in the business fairly often. I kind of took the mindset from the beginning, like, how many roles can stack together without compromising how we run the business, but how many roles can I stack together to make sure that somebody's calendar is completely full or their time is completely full while they're working for me, and which allows them to make a lot more money, but it also allows them to better understand the business, which allows the business to run better. So I'll stop there and kick it over to you. But I think the first person is some form of an acquisitions leads manager, and that could be the same person in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of double click on the same thing. I think one of the things that I've taken from being around you and Jimmy and other guys that I respect that run like legit long-term businesses, they've been doing it for a long time, is they have people that have a very long tenure with them. Um, and I'm not talking 2 or 3 years, I'm talking a decade, 2 decades, and you have a few of those, most of them do. And so I think one of the things you hit on there is building your business in a way where you can retain people for a long time, because that's how you build a real business. Like, if you have your team turning over every 2 months or 6 months or a year because you wanna be a cheapskate and pay people as little as possible, you're never gonna build anything real. So I think that's a big I haven't really spoken about it in that way, but I think that's a big thing is slowing down and looking at your revenue per employee and making sure that you can actually pay them in a way that makes them stay, that gives them upside. So yeah, I mean, I think for most people, they need to be spending as much time as they can putting deals together. And, I think if they have the lead flow for it and they're ramping that up, building, bringing in that lead manager slash acquisition person, which until you have a massive inflow of leads can be the same person. Like, that person can do both. So I think that's very valuable. And if someone's earlier on, they're doing one deal a month or every other month, yeah, you can go get an overseas lead manager, but you can still retain them for a long time. And we had some of our lead managers worked for us for 3, 4, 5 years. That's a good thought. That's a good point. And where do you see? I'm very aligned with that. And how do you see, like, how big can that get? In the sense of you bring in one lead manager, one acquisition person, and you start cranking up lead flow. Like, what is the next thing that breaks typically that you've seen?
I mean, the next thing that breaks is definitely the lead nurturing follow-up, right? I mean, that's gonna at a certain point, if your lead flow is big enough, you're gonna break that role, and it's gonna need to be broken up into 2 roles, right? So it just depends on your business. If you're gonna be a higher volume, flipping company or wholesaling company, you're gonna need a lot of leads, right, in order to hit those higher volumes. And so the average person, whatever you're paying them, they're hopefully they're good talent, but they still break, right? It's sort of like a project manager on the flipping side. They can only manage, maybe 3, 4 tops projects at one time before they break, and you need another project manager. So there is a breaking point there. The business that I ran was more of, we acquire 1 to 2 properties a month, and we take them down and we renovate them, we resell them, right? That was kind of the model. Now, occasionally we would wholesale, another one or so in there, but I wasn't trying to do so many deals that I broke the machine that I built.
Yeah.
If I wanted to do that model, though, I would definitely have needed to break it up, because there were times where, my acquisitions manager, he was definitely redlined, and things were falling through the cracks. So it's not like it's a perfect model. It just was I thought, the best model based on the business that I ran. But that they can break too, and then you would need to add people to that team, I think.
Yeah, I think too that like I think agents and investors, when they look at their calendar and they're honest with themselves, there's maybe like an hour a day of things that they're doing that actually like are productive for the business that matter. Like most of their calendar, like even, I go home and I have a lot of real estate agents in my family. I know a lot of them and investors as well. And they go, "Oh yeah, I went to the office meeting and then I drove homes and then I, sent some emails out and it was 10-hour day." And I'm like, "Well, you probably only did an hour of actually putting deals together, which is actually what matters." And so I think for you guys out there too, I think an important hire that I see be very, if you do it the right way, that I see very valuable for people is having some kind of admin operations person. I know you had that with Dan early on, Tucker, that kind of was a jack of all trades who helped you with your media, but also helped you with back office stuff. It also helped you, kind of all around. And I think that's an incredible hire, or as early on as you can afford it, some kind of operations admin person who can continue to take on more responsibility, who can take a lot of the stuff off your plate that's not deal making and not putting revenue together. But I think you can get a long ways with a lead manager, someone just responsible for acquisitions, and then someone handling kind of back office, general operations. I think you can get a lot further than most people think
I mean,
with
that's really
a
what we
few
ran
people.
with on the
Yeah.
acquisition side. And I will say that back office person, which was Dan for me for many, many years, and he still is on some levels, managing some of our communities still. But they are a necessary part, and really, I brought him on initially as our marketing manager, because your lead intake person, your acquisitions person, they're usually a salesperson, right? So they're not very detail oriented, because you want them to be better at acquisitions than lead management, but you can teach them to do lead management. But they're
But
salespeople, and you're the entrepreneur, which means you're both not detail oriented people, right? You would let a lot of details drop through the cracks. So having somebody that you can hire that can, figure out the IT problems, set up your, marketing schedules, make sure that you hit them, all the little stuff like that. And then if you do decide to do some media too for your business, whether it be coaching or whether it just be media to try and create the brand for your actual real estate business itself, you're going to need help with that. And if you can do as much of that in office as possible, which is exactly what we did for years and years and years, again, it's a role that you can kind of integrate more for these people that you hire to push the business further with less people.
there's something that you hit on I think is valuable. I talk about this a lot. I think every investor and agent, I think there's a lot more upside than downside to having some kind of social media presence at some point in their career and building a brand. Do you think, like my take is that I think everyone should be putting out something on some platform, somewhere online. Would you give the same advice to most people, whether even just if they just have a real estate business, because it's easier to hire, it's easier to raise money. Like I think online presence is kind of a business card to a certain extent nowadays, right? Like all the podcasts you've done, like that lives forever. Like people can go look at those for eternity and say like, oh shit, like look at what this guy's put out body of work wise and the brand that he's built. So what is your advice to people on that part? Building a brand, even if it's just for the real estate company.
I mean, I think it's huge. Over the years, we've done a ton of it. I mean, to be totally honest, I've taken a bit of a step back just because I think I burned myself out a little bit from doing it for a decade essentially.
And you were early to that game
An
too.
earlier adopter, but it doesn't mean that I won't re-engage fully at some point and start doing a lot more. I'm just kinda waiting for the right moment for our actual real estate business here, to then be able to raise a bunch more money and do, significantly more expensive homes and things like that. But I think overall, it's tremendously important because it's not a big cost, right? And at the end of the day, even if you don't get, 1,000,000 views or something, 100,000 views on your videos or whatever, it's teaching you to, like we talked about earlier, like your camera presence, right? Your ability to speak to microphone, which ultimately is your ability to speak to clients, potential clients, customers, lenders. It just makes you a better business owner, and it helps grow your communication skills, which at the end of the day is one of the most crucial skills in being successful in business.
And it makes you like really okay with being uncomfortable. And I mean, I remember my the first podcast I ever did was at Tarl's house. It was a Bigger Pockets live on Facebook, and there was like 1,000 people on the live, and I was sitting there in the room with him with the camera on me, and I was like, I felt like my nervous system was going to shut down. And you do it twice, then you do it the 10th time, then eventually like you enjoy it. And I think social media for most people is one of those things where like it feels cringy. They're worried about what their high school and college friends think about them when they start posting things online about them and their companies. And what I can tell you guys is that fades very quickly. Like your level of give a shit, that goes away really, really quickly once you realize the value that brings your business. And also people don't care. Like people are going through their day worried about their own stuff. They're not worried about they might laugh at it for a second. Like I get some wild comments once in a while, uh, on YouTube and
You've
stuff.
read some of them, but
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
but here's the other thing too, though, is like the more you do it, the better you get at it. And as soon as you just get decent, people are gonna quit taking shots at you because that you're good on camera now, right? You're good on the microphone. And that's a skill set that most people don't have, right? So that break-in period is definitely short. I don't know. I wouldn't worry about it. I know everybody does, but the good news is that it only takes a little while to get pretty good, and then once you're pretty good, the same people that probably were talking shit are probably watching all your videos and listening to the stuff that you're saying now, right? So
That's kind of a true metaphor for all of business is that break-in period of, what a lot of what we do with clients on the deal bench, whether they're new or very experienced is, hey, here's what sales actually looks like, right? Here is what operations actually looks like. Here is what it actually looks like to take business seriously. And there's that period of like, oh shit. It's especially, it's funny. I'm recording the TV show right now with James for a flipping show. And one of the things that has come up again and again on the show is making fun of my generation, like the producers and the guys on set. Like, man, like your generation is this, that, and the other. And it's true. Like, I just don't think people really realize what taking business and work seriously means. And because we've had the luxury, like I came into the adult world in 2016, when the economy was in an amazing place and has been for most of the last decade. And a lot of people my age have. And there's an expectation. My sister just graduated college, and there's an expectation of like 100 grand a year coming out for not having to do a whole lot. So it's crazy. But that one question dominated a lot of today's show. I think I'll lead that into a topic that we can wrap on. We talked about the importance of media. We talked about what a lean team can end on. One of the things that I've been spending on a lot as we've gotten questions around this is like how far people should scale their business. Um, one of the main topics in school is like, "Hey, I wanna get here." I'm like, "Why?" Like, "Well, I don't really know. I just wanna do deals." But when someone asks you that question, we'll wrap on this of how like, where should people look to for most people? Because I have my belief on this. Where should most people be aiming? I know it's their own thumbprint in terms of we talked about team, like, what is the end state that's a good end state for most people in this business as they ramp up deal flow and experience and things like that?
it's a good question. I for a while there, and you've been in business long enough, there was this big mantra of like how many deals you do, right? And I think people, although it's important metric, obviously for a lot of businesses, it was like the sole thing everybody fixated on, right? And so I think I'd almost reverse engineer it, right? And I'd be like, okay, how much money do I want to make a year, right? Okay, my bills cost me 100 grand a year, 50 grand, whatever it is, right? And I want to be able to stack another 100, 200 grand a year to either invest, save, reinvest in the business, whatever, right? Um, I'd probably start there and then just kind of Okay, now let's think about this. What kind of business are we running? If it's a wholesale business only, what are my price points? What are my average fees generally in this market? How many deals, a month do I need to do on average to do that? How many leads do I need per deal? And then you can kind of reverse engineer. Now, again, this might change every 9 months, like we talked about before, right?
Yep.
But that at least gives you a North Star to get pointed at. I think if you just are like, I want to do 5 deals a month out of my business, it's like, okay, it's good, but it's like you're just arbitrarily like a monkey throwing a dart and saying
Yep.
5 deals. What does that 5 deals really mean, right? And so I think if you can break it down for yourself a little more, financially by the numbers and why you want to do that, other than just to be able to beat your chest and say I do 60 deals a year. I think that's important. So I guess that would be the start of my answer, but I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I think my take on this is like you ask most people like, "Oh, I want to do $3 million a year. I want to do 20 deals a year, whatever it may be." I'm like, "Well, would you be happy with half a million or $1 million in take home profit from your business?" Because 99% of people aren't there. And if most people would answer that question, yeah, if I could create a half a million or $1 million a year from my business that I own, that I control, that allows me to live the life that I want, to build wealth, to buy rentals, to do what it is that you want to do. And I think for most people, don't worry about deals and revenue and headcount and overhead. Just look at like, can I create a real estate business that can pay me? Because you're not building a sellable company if you're flipping houses or doing wholesale deals or whatever. You're just, unless you become a massive builder who builds like all over the place and has internal proprietary systems and like you have technology, like maybe you have some enterprise value. But for most of us that are running a real estate business, the question really is, can you create 500 grand, $1 million a year in profit and start there? And then if you want to go beyond that, go beyond that. But I think that'd be a good aim point for most people is like, let me create $500,000 a year in profit for myself and then reassess if I need to go above that. So that's typically how I end on where I land on that question.
I think it's good. I mean, and here's the reality is that some people will forever be happy just generating 500 grand a year, right? Which there's no reason why they shouldn't. It's a lot of money. It's great living. Some people are just internally driven. They want to get to a million or 2 million or whatever it is. I'll tell you from personal experience, it doesn't become, you break $1 million in annual income. It's really no more exciting than 500,000, and it's really no more exciting than the first time you break 100,000, right? So like you said, if you want these things, ultimately, money's just kind of a tool. So keep that in mind when you start setting these bars for yourself. You're not going to gain like exceptionally more happiness by hitting those bars. So I wouldn't set them for those reasons. I'd set them, for other reasons, like I want to be able to create this much more money that then I can invest and do other things and ultimately just own houses free and clear that pay me. And then I can choose to do what I do and don't want to do every day. So I think that's the other trap that people fall into though, is when they keep saying they want to set the bar higher and higher for themselves. You got to be careful because I was a part of that trap for a long, long time. And, the further up I climbed income wise, the amount of additional happiness you get is so minimal. Like I forget what the economic law is, but it's like, we'll call it the law of deteriorating happiness, right? For each additional dollar that you get less and less happiness. So after a certain point, and it's very true. So, but sometimes it's not about money for people. It's about just drive and desire, and that's totally fine too. And often that's sometimes that's entire lives for people. Other times it's certain seasons of their life. Like so there's this is my old guy,
Oh, hey, sure.
retrospective comments here on like how to look at these things. But I would say, start at 500 grand. I'll make 500 grand. Let's see how you feel. Let's see how you spend. Don't be that dipshit that goes out and blows all that money on, everything, Louis Vuitton belts and all the crazy stuff. Be a normal real estate guy and just stack that money for a while and see how you feel. And then it gives you options. And then you can continue to grow and spend more and do more, or you can scale back. It's entirely up to you at that point.
Absolutely. Well, we'll wrap the show there. Thank you guys for hanging out for another show. Everyone that listens means the world. We've been growing a lot recently, and that just comes from you telling your friends and whoever else, because we don't put paid promotion behind this. As always, wherever you listen to us, a review, a share means the world. And until next time, you're only one deal away.